is the fourth of virtual book launch that this anthology has had. We've had one for Alberta poets, one for the Ontario poets. We've had another one for the Calgary poets, Calgary Public Library, which was held just an hour or two ago, and then this one for British Columbia. I wanted to say hello to all the readers this evening. I don't think we've ever met in person except perhaps for one or two, but I'm very grateful that you've contributed to this anthology, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you read the poems, which I've had to simply hear in my own head as I've read them myself. I'd like you to know that the purpose of this anthology was to capture the full range of pandemic experiences that we've had, all of us have had. So the various themes of isolation and grief, and at the end of love and laughter, are all part of the emotional world that 38 million Canadians have had to experience. I must say, I found this pandemic very hard on myself, and I'm very grateful that the publisher, Ashis Gupta, invited me to select and edit this anthology for Bayeux Arts, because it was a project that put me in touch with poets all across the country, and I began to realize what an important role poetry has to play in helping us cope with all the isolation and difficulties that we faced during the pandemic. So I'd like to again say thank you. I'm looking forward to these readings, and I hope that Ashis Gupta, the publisher, is here so that he can say a few words about what inspired him to think of having this anthology done.
Thank you. This is Shopna, and Shopna and I have been publishing for the last 25 years. And while this is the first COVID anthology that we embarked on, we have had some experience with almost global tragedies, because I think around 15 years ago, we were approached by some poets in the United States to do for them to do an anthology on the tsunami. And that was a very, very moving collection called Only the Sea Keeps. And again, that sense of horror and loss and memories again came into play when Katrina struck New Orleans. So we published another anthology of this time only, I think maybe there were 2 Canadian poets, but there were mostly about 60 or 70 US poets who contributed to that. And so when COVID struck, I knew what a Herculean task it is to put an anthology of this nature together. So I promptly turned to George to take on this onerous task, because Shopna and I wouldn't be able to manage it on our own. We know from our past experience that books like these resonate and echo in people's minds for days and months to come. And so we are hopeful that the beautiful poems that are part of this anthology will also resonate in people's hearts for many, many years to come. So thank you to all the poets who contributed. Thank you to George, and thank you to Adrienne for putting on this very, very professional Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Rhona McAdam is the author of 6 full-length poetry collections, the most recent of which are Cartography and Ex Ville. She lives in Victoria.
I'm going to read Home is a Different Country. As you can tell, I was a little spooked by what was going on in the spring. I remain spooked, but I feel a little more calm most of the time. Home is a different country. The house has never been cleaner, the streets quieter, the buses more empty, churning the night, every light on, every seat free but one. Life has got so small, there is no front to report from. Everywhere you look, you don't see it. No one yet knows what it looks like, so it's hard to hide from. Still, we take shelter and measures against it. Our hands have never been cleaner, our larders more curiously stocked, our agendas more empty. TV lights flicker in the neighbors' curtains as if they had company into the small hours. The news, the news, the news. I stay home, a new cliche, sewing masks, baking bread. Whither now the woman from the pool with the evil eye, the ill-tempered waitress from the coffee shop, the bastard who left me? A cold, bright spring pours its heart out. The mountains have never been clearer. On walks, the strangers pass, averting faces as if a glance might smite them. Out shopping, we play sluggish games of hopscotch on the floor's markings. Everything takes longer. Trying not to breathe, we mumble in our masks, gesture with our raw, clean hands. Wolves and cougars take a few liberties in our empty streets. The sun in children's paintings has always been the color of the tape now enfolding our playgrounds.
Tanya Carter has an MA in theater and a BA in world literature. Her earliest and most significant education was potlatch and a home full of avid readers. She has a beautiful daughter and now resides in Vancouver, BC, where she was born. Tanya is focused on longhouse tradition and nature.
My poem's called COVID, and yeah, I wrote this at the beginning a few months ago. Where the fear is based in entitlement, those beneath are unworthy of compassion and empathy. Where the fear is based in entitlement, the script of others remain unheard and unrealized. There are people out there who believe they're entitled to feel better than others based on virtue of entitlement. They went to school for more years. Their family spends more money. Their family is richer than others. They exploited the world with more fervor. The world is in demise based on the news. The world is covered in silk cloth and blood. Stained, the world needs to come back to its own outside of fear and reflect on what it is and wants to be. We are the world on a minute scale. We start from there. The person holding the pen or typing the keys and write our story with our own fears, our own strategies of how to be, how to get beyond the fear to move to a better place. Fear is an emotion like happiness. We were happy 10 months ago. Now we are not. The world is not. We are but one individual, one drop in the cosmos. We can be happy with a change of mind, like a movie can interrupt our emotions, veer us here, veer us there. We are more than a swinging pendulum or a feather in the wind. We can make up our minds to be happy, not to fear as much, not to feed the fear. We have the strength and capacity. Sometimes we can do it alone. Sometimes we need others. Many times. And that's okay. We are segregated. Government calls it isolated. Government calls it voluntary. We can be of one mind still. We can still be united. We can still build strength in each other. We can still be ourselves, whole and unfearful.
Heidi Greco. Heidi lives in Surrey, BC, in a house surrounded by a very compact forest. In 2021, Anvil Books will publish her Glorious Birds, a celebratory homage to Harold and Maude, a book about one of her all-time favorite films. Mine too. More info at heidigreco.ca.
I usually try to write happy poems, but this one is anything but. It's called Moral Dilemma. As I walked past the oldest house on my street, a place I'd always been curious about, The front door began to open. A man, extremely thin and pale, stepped out into the sunlight, ducking as he passed beneath the lintel. When I greeted him, he blurted that his wife was dead, lying inside the house, and approached me, his skinny arms extended longingly, seeking the comfort of a hug. I could see that he'd been crying and knew that my rejecting him would only make him feel worse. But these were still the days of standing apartness, and who could know what his woman had died of.
Brian Day. Brian has published 4 books of poetry with Guernica Editions, including Conjuring Jesus and The Daring of Paradise. He lives on Salt Spring Island, BC.
When the pandemic started and people asked me what I was finding hardest, my answer would be not being able to swim. So this is a poem that started being about not being able to swim and then drifted, as poems can do, into some other areas. It's called Unskinned. These are the days when no one goes swimming, the pool unbroken, pristine, alluring, and touch is exiled to a foreign country. We bump against the imagined breath of neighbors, carry with us a new weight of space, physically, chemically, neutral, inert. We enter a fiction of expendable bodies, encased in these exoskeletons of caution, haunted by the memory of our tactile lives. My flesh thirsts each time I pass the pool, remembering generous water on my skin, the brightness of a body sheathed in wet. These are the days when the ocean is closed, beaches and shorelines forbidden to our feet, a walk in the forest, transgressive, illicit. We inhabit a world where dancing is outlawed, showers and gyms are locked against us, and hugs take place in vacant air. These are the days when caress is violation, hand on skin, a cause for rebuke, any intimacy condemned as criminal. We know our bodies are made for embrace, for each cool immersion in animating water, each enlivening frisson of skin on skin, to be meetings of breath and liquid and lip, to be creatures keen with exultation of touch, from nuzzle to the full nakedness. Our bodies have been excised from our lives. We are the breaking of all that precedes us, abducted from every sleek animal we are. Thank you.
Tanya Bartel. Her first collection of poetry, Everyone at This Party, Ice House Poetry Goose Lane Editions, was released at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. She lives in Pitt Meadows, BC.
This poem was written in isolation during the first wave, when it seems many of us were having more nightmares and strange dreams than usual. For me, even the bad dreams have become a tie that binds. My poem is called I Am the Lonely Part of My Day. Speaking to an audience of air and one chair from my pulpit, I adore the bone structure of my hands when I watch them unfold and describe my hours, a waste of elegant curving gestures. I've shredded the day into separate strips, eat, pace, window watch, gargling loud as I please in silk pajamas. I'm a portrait above the sink and again in the hall. No man is an island, but a woman is a penthouse. I am my homeland, with stations set up according to the limits of the floor plan. A piecemeal setup, here a sleeping area, there a dish pit. Each emotion too shelters in its place, a patchwork of wailing, next to painting, next to terror, beside curiosity. A beetle on its back has no friends to flip it back to life side. Night, the denouement of the final episode, where I dream my doctor, who becomes my daughter, is driving a convertible and I'm in the passenger seat. She's speeding through a construction zone and there's a giant hole in the asphalt we go through and down. I have just enough time to put both arms around her, say, I love you, honey, and we crash, soft as laundry tossed on a bed. The bone structure of our greatest fear is actually boneless, soft, and we hear neither clamor nor clash. Clamor nor crash. Thank you.
Christine Smart. She lives on Salt Spring Island, the setting for her poem Hummingbird that won the 2020 Federation of BC Writers Poetry Contest. Hedgerow Press published 2 books of her poetry. Decked and Dancing, People's Poet Award, 2007, and The White Crow.
This is called Reaching Out. I do live on a fairly remote island, although most of the time it's quite a busy place. Salt Spring, but at the moment it's very quiet. Reaching out. Pink camellia blossoms flow along Morningside Road to the harbor by the miniature post office, flanked by the ferry dock and rock salt cafe. They flow the way foot passengers in ferry traffic bustles and rolls. In March, when I last wrote you, the postmistress sold me a stamp, passed over change for a $5, said, "This village is turning into a ghost town." Between ferries, dead quiet, 3 people separated by 6 feet on the street. One cultivates dreadlocks, one disguised under an orange toque, another plays flute. This week, the car deck, half vacant. Few cars and trucks pour off the ramp, trundle uphill home to isolate. Roads deserted, shops barred. Shift change on the dock. Fluorescent vested deckhands scurry. An empty public bus waits. The post office, sign CLOSED. No stamp for my envelope. I trace your name, longhand script in black ink. I promised you a letter a day. The camellia blossoms wither on the street.
Shelley Leedahl. Shelley is the author of 12 books in various genres, including The Moon Watched It All, Red Deer Press, and I Wasn't Always Like This, signature editions. Leedahl has lived in all 3 Western provinces and currently resides in Ladysmith on Vancouver Island, where she is an avid hiker and kayaker.
Mine is called The Quiet. So pronounced, it takes a shape. It desires the syllables of a name. On Saturday night streets in this white-walled townhouse, punctuated by a red couch like a garish smear of lipstick against the north wall. Silence. This non-sound, the definition of time invisibly rolling forward against future shores. Yes, the creek still sings its silver song, and at 7 p.m., neighbors ritualistically ring bells, and the fire hall siren clears the air with its salute to healthcare workers. But then it's back to the inflamed quiet. Perhaps a check-in with the news, though now every other tragedy is made so much worse because of the collective backdrop. It's getting dangerous to breathe. Don't get me wrong, I'm not unhappy, but I have become superstitious, not tempting fate with even a thought toward the moment a vaccine might blossom. And I'm cautious going back to the old ways, hiding rolls of money in the house, towering canned food in the basement beside the camping gear I am not using, surreptitiously preparing, in case of anarchy, a bloodbath. I should not have said that. I must be a quiet house in this mute and quivering sci-fi movie we're all trying to reach the end of. The soundtrack is silence, and it's disconcerting, foreign, like casualty numbers in Africa, like mysteries we may never pronounce.
Chris Bullock. Chris retired from his career as an English professor at the University of Alberta in 2000 and moved to Vancouver Island. Since then, he has published 3 detective novels jointly with his wife, Kay Stewart, and currently runs a poetry and song circle in Victoria.
Here's the poem, written in the early days of the pandemic, just on the edge of things. And it's called What We Choose. Good choice, says my co-facilitator when I agreed to cancel the poetry and song circle. Good choice, says my guitar teacher when I agreed to cancelling the group lesson. Exactly what choice did I have, I ask silently. Yes, I could choose to discuss poems in an empty room, play my pieces while the teacher shouts advice from the kitchen. I feel my fear of abandonment fueling a fierce protest against get-togethers cancelled, travel plans in tatters, empty shelves and closed borders. I walk to the one event left, St. Patrick's Day outdoors. Bring your own Guinness, meet next to the statue of an Irish pioneer. No one is there, nothing next to the statue, except a profusion of Christmas roses. I stand there looking at them, suddenly still. Their presence takes my breath away. Then I remember the young man outside the store saying that we were the first people he'd seen not carrying endless rows of toilet paper, talking about his shopping for the elderly. I remember passing on the way here a man on a park bench with a Martin guitar. He's playing a Bach partita immaculately while a split seam in his jacket leaks cotton. He says he regularly plays for the homeless in the park until, always about this time, they get too rowdy and he retreats to this bench to play to himself. I walk back through the quiet streets. The sky seems clearer than when I came, like the clear blue sky the residents of Wuhan are apparently seeing for the first time. I didn't choose that an event I wanted to take place didn't, that a young man touched my heart with his kindness, that I would get to hear guitar music, that I would see flowers and not crowds. I didn't choose any of this whole cascade of cancellations and surprises, and yet, walking with my unused cans of Guinness, clanking in my backpack, I seemed to be, for a moment, perhaps, or perhaps for a life, walking towards a world which I sense I would choose with all my heart.
Lorna Crozier. Lorna is a Governor General Award winner, the author of 18 books of poetry, and an officer of the Order of Canada. Lorna lives on Vancouver Island. Through the Garden, a love story with cats, the story of her life with the writer Patrick Lane, has been published now, I believe, in this fall, 2020.
The poem I'm going to read is set now, but also about 10 years ago, the first time I was invited to read poetry and give some lectures in Beijing. And so it's set also in my place in North Saanich and Beijing. The Stars. Years ago, we hosted a poet from Beijing. Our house was in what some would call the country. Winter on our coast, everything was washed and washed again by rain. And before we sat at our table, we invited him, our very honored guest, through the sliding glass doors onto the deck. And he looked up. He'd never seen the stars before. "You must be very rich," he said, "to live here." "We're only poets like you," my husband said. "But in Canada, it's not unusual to see the sky." When I went to Beijing 5 years later, the woman from the university who met me at the airport gave me a mask for the pollution, she said. On my day off, I walked on my own, the only woman, the only person really, without a tour guide, into the forbidden city. Some in masks, others not. Everyone looked at me as if it were I who was forbidden. I wanted out, not because of being strange, that is, being alone, or walking down the stairs in the wrong direction, a tide of people forcing me back up, but the crowds, the heat, the air pressed down, and the ribs holding my heart collapsed. I think of my friend now at his apartment in Beijing, a place I was not invited to. This was not unusual, I found out later. We met at a restaurant, a bookstore, where we read poems together. The audience was appreciative, and all of them Chinese. The translations of my poems, a scholar in the front row told me, were very fine. This spring, the streets deserted. In many countries, loved ones dying alone in what we here call care homes. My husband died a year ago of other causes. Beside him in the bed, I kissed his head, his chest, his feet. When my Beijing friend walks outside in one of the biggest cities in the world, can he see for the first time there the stars?
Ellie Sawatzky. Ellie is a poet and writer from Kenora, Ontario, currently based in Vancouver. She was a poetry finalist for the 2019 Bronwyn Wallace Award, and her debut poetry collection is forthcoming from Nightwood Editions in fall 2021.
So I'm going to read my poem. It's called Obad at the End of the World. And it's a bit of a strange one for me. I wrote it back in May as a love poem for my boyfriend at the time. And then we broke up a few days later. And so it became a breakup poem. And an Obad is a song or poem for a lover departing. So I think it had to be a breakup poem for it to work. And it also became more potent in my mind as an expression of the uncertainty that we've all been facing in COVIDian times, and that we always face. You know, it's a cliche, but change is the only constant. So not even a love poem necessarily maintains its status as a love poem. This poem also positions itself on New Year's Eve. So it straddles the divide between 2019 and the dumpster fire that is 2020. And it's written in 2 columns. I'll show you. Looks like this. So it's 2 separate poems that with a divide between them, and they can be read separately or they can be read all together as one. So I'm going to read it all together. Obad at the End of the World. 4 a.m. in your friend's house, our love wakes their baby. The trilingual cat understands the hum of our animal tongues. Bells clang an alarm for the airport, sounding our fleeting separation, my departure from this year to the next. What could be any kind of year because it hasn't happened yet. You and I, we only just happened. We can't see the beginning. Your grandmother's ashes sprinkled on the pink ice of the river. We can't ask what's on the other side.
Sandra Sugimoto. Sandra was born and raised on the unceded lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations in British Columbia. She is a third-generation Japanese-Canadian artist. Currently, she is a student and the writer's studio at Simon Fraser University.
I will share my screen, and my poem is about someone who became pretty much a household name during the beginning of COVID. So hopefully this works. There it is. And just another as an aside, it's also somebody who I went to high school with. So I was quite surprised to see him interpreting. This is called Clearly Speaking. 3 p.m., Nigel. Emphatic gestures transcend interpretation.
John Barton. John Barton's most recent books are a book of poems, Last Family, a memoir, Signal Editions 2020, and the Essential Dirk Winan, The Porcupine's Quill 2020. He lives in Victoria, BC, where he is the city's 5th poet laureate.
The poem I'm going to read is actually a sonnet crown. So it's in 7 sections. And like everyone who's contributing, my poem was written a while ago. You know, the spring seems like years ago, not months. So the poem is called Viral Notebook. We stand in vigil, lined up famine style, compiling shopping lists to archive tastes, doubtless to carry forward. The culled aisles called on to be provisioned, a foretaste of crushed sightings of unshelved tomatoes and fished out runs of endangered tuna. Our carts skittering past, forced to our toes till too late, what's theirs still gone, lacunas of our survival skills can't fill, draft online facts doping our game, rota of symptoms weighed against what listlessness undermines, obliged to meet out distance, unwelcome while we wait, the stillness inside the store unwanted, so unwanted, what's in store. Unwanted, so unwanted, what's in store. We self-isolate, having washed our hands, not just of germs, but the germ of cocksure, unguarded entanglements. Such demands a contagion, staggering the planet, all of desire put aside with the bleach beneath the sink. Want called to the carpet and judged, ignored stains unimpeachable. What we've spilt covertly starting to spread, promiscuous conviviality, an import bottled in lovers and friends, if opened, hard to cork. Reality, better spent with long books and meals for one, the yen for intimacy overcome. The yen for intimacy overcome, our solitary walks salutary, streets quiet despite those who outrun us, jogging toward their obituaries, at unsafe, uneven speeds. Their exhale, a butterfly net they ensnare us with, incurably. Our lungs, wings they outsail, till they wind us, free to sunbathe or seethe. Our salutary walks solitary along harbors so static they mirror vacated worlds upside down, boat empty, freeze-framed, unreflective, no wavy blur should a flock of geese alight on itself, cold, companionable, constant, aloof. Cold, companionable, constant, aloof. The man smoking all day across from me scatters his scatters ash from his balcony, storm-proof windows behind him, enduring calmly rays of spring sun, elbows bent to the rail. So often he overshadows my thoughts while reading, making senseless without fail this subterfuge, how feeling safe is fraught, but glancing up, I find I like him there, the nearest I'm allowed a confidant, one who can keep his distance while caring in no way for me, smoking in private, he thinks, blind to how I watch from afar, the complicit sun leaving us unmarred. The complicit sun leaving us unmarred. I step outside with my isolation, the labyrinth gate I walked to left ajar, below limbs of wind-struck cherry to shun sundry vectors of unreasoned panic, luring me no deeper in till let go the scattering petals empathic. Their mandala a gyre I set aglow, circling in and about, around and out, the self-effacing path the rock shards mark, level with the mown grass, a walkabout to break me flat under sky in this park, seldom as in the pink of loneliness, empathy made pivotal through crisis. Empathy made pivotal through crisis. The coins shops fear are septic. I offer to a tall, cold-looking man I'm sure is penniless, change routinely spent, proffered to feed my conscience, help it assure more stomachs stay full because all hearts rest less empty of distress. My scruples before today not replete, the streets I walk blessed, although void of commerce to intersect, like minds joined together haphazardly, despite what distance obliges, unchecked viral spread stepped around straightforwardly, conviction at arm's length somehow heightened, a pandemic of unconcern flattened. A pandemic of unconcern flattened the door to this solace we've not wanted, locking behind us for like days on end, worlds within world, by patience undaunted, if rendered claustrophobic, outside views turned inward, an internal exile, pride, a quiet scrubbed of exhaustion, renewed by reserve, a heron or gull, biding its time to be anywhere I am not, freed by my absence, fountains in the square, their fitful spray uninspired, overshot by night skies more starry, daytimes more clear, all the while my appetites undefiled, we stand in vigil, lined up famine style.
Lisa Pasold, originally from Montreal and now lives in New Orleans. I guess so you're an honorary BC person, where she's been photographing flowers during quarantine. Her 2000 book of poetry, Any Bright Horse, was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award.
Hopeful sugar like that. As I stand on my front step, 2 firemen jog past in their red and blue cycling shorts, ludicrous bright flags of thighs and ass. Yes, like everyone else, I miss the old uniform of satin micro shorts, which brightened the start of every day. Socially distanced, my neighbor Herman stays on his porch and says to me, let's be honest, those men have lovely legs. The question is, how many notes can you lose and still keep the song? Handfuls, lungfuls, there's an awful lot you can give away. My other neighbor, who lives in New York in his heart, as Herman says, well, New York dodges out the door and away from us, all hurry up morning worry, and who can blame him? How nice it would be to walk slow, slow to the corner cafe and sit trying to answer questions, even if we did not know the answers, like what art is about and how it opens into us but never transparently, and how authenticity isn't just about the good stuff. Herman and I hold our own mugs from our own houses and hover on our own stoops. To have wings is no guarantee of flight. We drink our coffees and Herman pets his dog and says, "Oh, sugar, you want to go for a run like those pretty men, don't you, honey sweet?" The breeze comes up silvering ripples, presaging rain, fragile as my pathetic fallacy. Oh, Heathcliff, oh, Bridget Jones, running into this mess. Herman once admitted to flying down this very sidewalk, dress gown flapping, to declare hopeless love to an ugly man. Aren't we all like that? Or at least the best of us want to keep running. We want to go stumbling wild with glee and with grief. And we stand here envying the glossy sophisticates. Every fireman is a pyromaniac at heart, Herman says, as if he is waiting to show me an ember tattooed and burning deep within.
As it turns out, in the natural order of things in the book, my poem is the last tonight, which I can tell you is a daunting thing to have to do after listening to all these great pieces. And I don't know about laughter, but I think there is some love in it anyway. Food and drink. Now we make our inventories just as our grandparents did during deprivation, depression, war. Stocks of dried beans, frozen breads, and baked goods, counting cans with fingertips and careful measure. Now we make our inventories mental and material, dinners, lunches, and breakfasts, the beer, wine, and liquor, words newly known and newly minted, fomites and quarantinis, online means and meaning, Zoom and FaceTime and Skype. Now we make our inventories of places we won't go and people we cannot touch, of how much we have hoarded and squandered, of the arts made by each play, Macbeth and the Ship of Fools, how much we have lived and how much we have wasted. Now we take our inventories of the miracles we have missed and seen, of crows in the evening light off to the rookery, of rainbows that stopped us in our tracks and blood-dyed sunsets, of risk and time and how much we have left.